If you take today's gospel and put it into relationship with last Sunday's gospel, there's really some similarities and some differences to consider. And over it all, we have to keep in mind in Mark's translation, this is the end, really, of Jesus' public ministry. This is the last exchanges. From this moment forward, Jesus is moving to Jerusalem. Of course, we all know what's going to happen there. And so these last couple exchanges, both last Sunday and today, very important to consider. And if you were at one of the masses I had last weekend, today's homily will sound very similar. I'm going to raise similar questions. But if you were spared hearing my homily last Sunday, you'll still be able to figure out what I mean today. Last Sunday, hopefully you'll remember, we saw again the sons of Zebedee, James and John, two of the apostles. And today we meet Bartimaeus, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus. There's some similarities and some differences in these exchanges with the Lord. First of all, last weekend we heard James and John, and what do? They call out to the Lord. They're with him, walking once again, and they said, Jesus, we need you to do something for us, and we want you to do whatever it is we ask you. Quite an interesting statement. We want you to do whatever it is we ask you. Today we hear a similar statement, a request, but we hear it from Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus, upon hearing that Jesus was in the vicinity, what did he do? He simply called out, Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me. Two very different ways to approach the Lord. On one hand, we have to really question how it is they approached him. Last weekend, I noted that James and John were rather demanding, rather arrogant. They were really subscribing to what we would call today entitlement. They felt they were owed something. And we hear a little bit further that they wanted power and authority. That's what they were seeking. When Jesus gave basically the same answer he gave this Sunday, what is it you would like me to do for you? What was their reply? Well, we want you, when you come into your kingdom, have one of us sit on your right, one of us sit on your left. We want the two positions of authority. That's what we want. Today, very different. Bartimaeus is rather humble. He doesn't presume to really ask the Lord anything. He acknowledges who Jesus is, and that's really the beauty of this particular gospel. He's about the only one who realized who Jesus was. He calls out to him in the messianic title, Son of David. He knew that he was in the presence of God. And he sat on the roadside calling out, knowing he was calling to the Messiah, and simply requested, have pity on me, have mercy. And it wasn't until later when Jesus called him and he went, and Jesus said, what is it that you'd like me to do for you? Same statement that was made to James and John last week. He simply said, I'd like to see. A very humble asking. There's another similarity in these two stories, and the similarity is that these questions are not asked in isolation. Other people are around. Last week, Sunday, we heard James and John in front of the other apostles say very clearly, we want to be number one and number two. These other 10 guys listening, we don't really care about them, even though we've been with you all together all of these years. And the reaction of the other 10, what did we hear last Sunday? They were rather indignant. They were angry at the two brothers. Today, a little bit different. The similarity is it's done in a crowd, but what is it that we hear? Two different reactions. Reaction number one, be quiet. And the other reaction after Jesus says, bring him forward, they encourage him. Be quiet, be encouraging. And what is it that really happened to Bartimaeus after he was healed? He became a follower. Simple question this Sunday, really continuation of last Sunday. How is it that we approach Jesus? How is it that you do that? How is it that I do that? Are we like James and John? Lord, I need you to do this. Is that how we approach him? Or is it like Bartimaeus, simply sit in his presence and acknowledge that he is God? Daily I go to our adoration chapel and just sit there. And it's wonderful to see, usually a few others there, but so few of us really take advantage to sit like Bartimaeus in the presence of the Lord. Not much is required to go to the Lord other than to make the time and sit in his presence. And an image that's often been used in spiritual circles, it's like going to the beach to lay out in the sun. What do you have to do when you get there? Not a heck of a lot. You just lay there, and the sun does his work. Same thing. If we are like Bartimaeus, we just simply place ourselves in the presence of the Son, S-O-N, Son of God, and we allow Jesus to do his work. How is it that we approach the Lord? Is it that spirit of entitlement, I need you to do this, or is it simply to be in his presence? How is it that we acknowledge and approach the church, founded by Jesus? How is it that we come to the church? Is it like James and John, and that spirit of arrogance, we know better than what the church may ask us to do or teach? On a daily basis, I encounter individuals like that, usually in my emails, that seem to know better than the church and her teaching for some 2,000 years. Is it with that spirit of an arrogance, or is it like Bartimaeus? Humble. I desire to understand. Please teach me. Two very different approaches to the church. And finally, how is it that we approach a stranger? We encounter strangers every day, each one of us. How is it that we approach them? Is it a reaction like to that of James and John? We're angry, frustrated? Or is it like one of the two parts of the crowd of Bartimaeus, silence or encouragement? How is it that you see the presence of God in strangers? Back a year ago, it'd be Thanksgiving, I conducted an experiment on Thanksgiving morning. Many of you were at Mass that morning. I had one of our seminarians dressed up, sitting out with his Tim Hortons cup of coffee, begging for money. He looked rather indigent. And it was interesting talking with him after the Mass about his experience. Many were very kind to him, offering to assist him in some way. That very same seminarian, 4 days later was Sunday, the 12:30 Mass, so you're off the hook here at 8. It was the 12:30 Mass. He was in a suit, shirt and a tie. He texted me about 5 minutes before Mass because someone came up and angrily greeted him and threw him out of their bench. He said in his text to me that day, he said, I looked like a bum a few days ago when everybody was nice to me. Today I'm actually dressed up nice and I got thrown out of your church. How is it that we approach a stranger? Someone that we do not know. A story that I know I told you, I believe it was around Easter time, a story from Monsignor Golumbek, one of my good friends. He is retired and lives in the city in an apartment off of Elmwood Avenue. And he had shared this story with me a number of years ago. It was the day after Easter. We all know, for those of us in Polish circles, that's a holiday, Dingus Day. And he was shopping on Elmwood Avenue, going to little shops, picking up the things he needed. And as would happen, and I'm sure it's happened to many of us, one of the stories he came out of, as soon as he came out of the store and was walking down Elmwood to go to the side street where his car was parked, he saw a man coming towards him, rather indigent looking, and he knew he was going to get hit up for money. He knew it. And I guess all of us have been in that situation at some point in time. And Father Bob is always prepared for those moments. He always has a few bucks in his pocket waiting. And lo and behold, as this man approached him, the man stopped him and asked him for money. And Father Bob reached into his pocket and handed him some money. The man thanked him and kept walking down Elmwood Avenue, Father Bob going the other way in his own direction. And oddly enough, when Father Bob got to his car, parked on the side street, who was leaning up against the trunk of his car but this man that he had given money to? And Father Bob, filled with no fear, ever, went up to his car, and the man addressed him and said, "May I ask you your name?" And he said, "My name is Robert." And the man said, "Well, I want to thank you, Robert." And Father Bob said to him, "Well, may I ask you your name?" And the man said to him, I think you know who I am." And he walked away up to Elmwood Avenue and turned the corner. Father Bob, putting his things in the car, drove up to the corner, and by the time he got to the corner, the gentleman was nowhere in sight. Who is it that you think he encountered that day after Easter that year? How is it that we approach and see the strangers that we meet in our life? What is it that we see in them? Similarly, how is it that others encounter us? I remember one of my trips to Disney a number of years ago. We were having dinner at the California Grill on top of the Contemporary Hotel. It's a beautiful vantage point to see the fireworks and so on over the Magic Kingdom. And, I'm a little type A anal retentive, if you haven't noticed. And, we make sure that we get out on the deck for the fireworks early. I timed dinner correctly. And that particular time that we were there, same was true. We were one of the first out on the deck because I want to have front row view. And as it got closer to the hour for the fireworks, people were filling in. And just a few moments before they began, I noticed way in the back a family, a mother and a father, obviously, and their adult child in a wheelchair. Was obvious that she had disabilities. And it was also obvious where they were standing, they couldn't see anything. And so we went to them and gave them our place. And after the fireworks were over, we stood there and talked with them for a little while. And the woman in the wheelchair said to me, she said, "Do you realize that out of all of the people standing out here, you were the only ones who offered your place to us? And how thankful we are to you that you did that." I share that story not to pat myself on the back, but to share with you that in a given moment, every moment, we have an opportunity to really be that presence of Christ in a simple way to someone else. How is it that we see, and how is it that others see Christ in us?